What's up? Okay, we're here. We made it.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello again.
Um, I tried a little different thing here with the intro to the stream, as you probably saw. Hopefully we sound good. I tested things out, and I think everything looked okay, or sounded okay. Today I have with me Aaron. Aaron, I always tell people to introduce themselves.
I'm Aaron, one of our technical designers.
Yes, cool. I did fix the delay, I think, mostly. I was very concerned about that because last week the camera was running at a slower speed than the audio, and it was very frustrating. So
Was that for a sensor delay on our filthy mouths?
it was a yeah, I wish it was the capture device that we used was a couple milliseconds
Some
behind.
faint background noise.
It's probably the game. The game music is on right now, but I can just kill that, or we could leave it. Let's just kill it. Oh, you know what? The stream might be playing in the background. Let me see. Is it?
I'm pretty sure I'm actually the original Aaron. So,
Yes, I
but
agree.
you are welcome to use my name.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else playing in the
Generous.
background.
Thank you.
Okay, no delay. Sweet. Turn up Aaron's mic volume. Great, I can do that.
I might also have to just turn up my own volume.
Yes, here, I'm going to turn up Aaron's volume. Ready?
How's that? Is that
Okay.
a little better?
Okay, so we're here. This is our experimental number 2. Oh, you know what? This is exactly what was happening. The headphones were there. Okay, cool. I've figured out a mystery to myself. This is experimental 2 reveal stream. We've already talked about this a little bit during the vlogs, but it's going to be fun to like sort of demo it today. Is there anything that we should get into before we start talking about experimental? Is there anything you want to catch people up on?
No, I mean,
It's gonna drink my
just
seltzer.
I guess the goal here is to prep everybody who's going to be jumping into our experimental branch and testing this and getting a feel for how this new feature works out. So
Nice.
make sure if you guys have any questions about how it's working, just throw them at us and hopefully we'll get that figured out for you.
We already got the question that we that everyone's interested in as well with this. First of all, everyone loves your hat. And they want to know where you got your hat. So second of all, people asked about modularity, but we might just have to go.
Oh, modularity. I'm not sure what people are talking about. I'm sure we haven't shown or teased anything about that.
Nope, I don't know anything about that.
Well, I
at
guess
all.
maybe it's on our roadmap. That must be what they're referencing.
That's what I think. Modularity. Anyway, so Aaron is simultaneously working on modularity right now. I won't say anything else. If you want to see some interesting stuff about modularity, you should go watch the vlog.
Yeah, the latest vlog has quite a tease in it. There's a much older version of the modularity as a prototype in a previous vlog, but things have been changing a bit. So we'll have more on that pretty soon here.
Yes.
But we don't want people getting too distracted, so we can get good feedback on our individual feature updates.
Yes. Thank you, Arvarius, for posting the link. Yeah, we're trying to go in order and sort of let people digest things one at a time rather than just be like, here's all the stuff. So, plus, because we're iterating on all of that stuff separately.
And it also makes it easier for us to kind of filter the feedback when we're only, isolate your variables. You don't want too many things changing in game at once, or it's really hard to tell how an individual change is affecting things relative to everything else.
Yes. Nope. They're like, nope, we want to overeat.
Also, we just want
to
to see you guys sweat. So.
That's part of my day. I just spend an hour just looking at the online presence and just being like, oh, they're sweating. Ooh, this is nice. Hi, Haggard Nerd. What's up? Wolga Monster bought some merch. Thank you so much for buying merch. I guess we should talk about that right now since we have a captive audience. We just launched merch with Fangamer last week. Really excited about that. A lot of people have been asking about merch. Yes, we have it now. It's through Fangamer. Someone I'm sure will post a link.
It looks amazing.
Looks
Fangamer
awesome.
Did an incredible job for us.
Looks awesome, and also the beautiful part is we didn't have to do much work to make it happen.
Yeah,
right?
well, no, that's one of my favorite things about Fangamer is they have a lot of designers and artists that, you know, either on staff or that they contract with. And so you get these really fantastic interpretations of other people's properties. And so I think and I'm just guessing, but the whole idea behind the name Fangamer is it started as fan art that they were making of other existing titles. And I like seeing that community interpretation of something that you're doing and something that's only, you know, we've obviously authorized it, but we weren't the designers behind it.
Yes. Everyone's getting really excited about what's happening behind us right now. Someone just lifted their desk and everyone was like, whoa. Yes, we have modularity in the office.
We're also working on our anti-gravity modules, so.
Yes, absolutely. There was something that I wanted to cover. Yes, thank you. Veronica is covering it right now. So if you're seeing behind us, hold on, I'll switch to the other camera just because I think it's important. If you're seeing behind us, that's several people working through crash bugs right now. Crash bugs and just bug fixing overall. So if they see this, they should turn around and say hi right now. But yeah, they're working real hard right now, making sure that there are things getting fixed as well as things getting made. So, okay, switching back. Yes, they're waving. Yay. Cool.
It's like at a stadium when you realize the Jumbotron is focused in on your seat.
You're just obliviously sitting there and all of a sudden you're like, oh! Zabir is watching the stream. Cool. So I guess that's about all I have really to talk about right now. Oh, wait, we didn't get a link for the Fangamer thing, so I'm just going to take 2 seconds and do that. Because that's like the most annoying thing to me when I'm watching a stream and someone talks about something and then like they don't provide it.
It's even better when they announce what you're talking about once at the very beginning, and then you spend the next 30 minutes trying to figure out what the hell anybody is saying.
I mean, we're sort of doing that right now.
A little bit, but we keep making references.
Yeah.
You said Fangamer again.
Yes.
Now you're throwing the link in.
Okay, hold on. I think I got it. Well, here, you're just going to get the shirt, and then you can go to the other links. Wyverius beat me. Okay, cool. All right, so now it's time to play the game, I think. I'm going to toss this over there. I don't need it anymore. I do need this mouse. Ooh, okay. Sweet. Yep, that is it. Thank you, Wyverius. This emoji is modular. Oh, it is. Okay, so game time. Let's switch over. Let's make sure everything's working over there. Oh, it's not. There it is. Comes. It's back. All right, switching over. Sweet. Okay, so we won't hear anything because I haven't sorted out that issue yet, but it's fine. It's totally fine. Actually, they can hear things. We can't. So I'm going to give them a little volume here. There we go.
So if you guys want to make up any weird sounds,
yes, please do.
We'll just have to believe you.
So I guess, do you want to start off with a little background about Terrain as a resource and just like what the idea is?
Yeah. So I mean, the original idea just stemmed from the fact that we have this core mechanic in the game that is kind of the backbone of everything else that you're doing with deforming the terrain. But aside from deforming the terrain and having these big resource clumps that you could, when you deformed it, gather up into a resource chunk in your backpack, it didn't really directly integrate with any of the other systems in the game. And it just seemed like a kind of a wasted opportunity for us. And so we brainstormed about what could you do with it. And, you know, one of the most obvious things as well, we have this idea of tactility in the game and that everything is a physical thing. It would make sense that terrain is itself a resource. And so just finding a way to get that terrain into a resource form was the original goal. And then as we started playing around with different implementations of that and, you know, different ways of providing it that hopefully didn't really disrupt the kind of laid back core game loop that you have with deforming, we realized an opportunity, particularly with the existing constraint being power. And I think something that nobody really likes about the game right now, which is that you're constantly running out of power and then you just sit there watching your power tick back again. It's a really kind of painful disruption to that laid back feeling. And we saw that opportunity with terrain to get rid of that interruption to the game loop and have it's effectively ammo in a form that you could more proactively refill rather than just passively waiting for it to fill on its own.
Right.
And that opens up all sorts of different interesting possibilities. Power now can become something that we can spend on a lot more varied and interesting sort of abilities that you are using intermittently, because you don't need power to be constantly available just to do your core actions. So that's kind of the pieces that came together. And then on the terrain side, having this new resource that you're gathering, the idea behind the reusable canister is we didn't want you to have the same kind of clump gathering that you have with regular resources, because obviously there's a lot more of terrain and your backpack would really quickly just fill up with chunks of terrain.
Yeah.
And so the canister is a way of kind of controlling what's going into your bag and what isn't. And then once we had the idea of these reusable canisters that weren't consumable, that didn't just spawn while you were gathering it, the natural direction to go from there was, okay, what about other things that we store in canisters? What if those were also using the same reusable item instead of just magically spawning them?
Right.
So there's all of these sorts of ripple effects that come from this relatively simple change. But that also means that there's a lot of variables introduced, and so we're not expecting this to just work perfectly right out of the gate. It's going to take a lot of iteration. It's going to take a lot of feedback from the community as they start playing with it.
Totally.
Which is why we want to drop it into experimental as soon as we can.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about the fact that now we're essentially going to have. By the way, this is a dev branch, so like there's some bugs that are fixed in the main branch that aren't fixed here.
Yeah,
so
have we told them about main and dev at all in the past?
we haven't, but they know it exists because there's ways of seeing how many branches you have on Steam.
Gotcha.
Uh,
So, I mean, just as a quick introduction to anybody who's unfamiliar, our active main branch is where we are, doing most of the development work that's going into our next live updates. The development branch is more of a kind of experimental prototype space where we can work on long-term features. And that's the branch that we cut our experimental builds from. So it can be a little behind the curve in terms of up-to-date bug fixes.
right. I mean, there's definitely a concern to try and make sure some of that stuff is sorted beforehand, but it doesn't always make it. Like right now, there's some audio bugs that are like are pretty prevalent. It's like to spend time and fix it in the developmental branch is not the best.
So that said, I mean, don't be surprised if you play on the experimental build and you're seeing bugs that you thought had been fixed. They very likely have been, just not in this particular version.
Yeah, so I actually have the in-game sound super low right now because just for us, so you probably don't hear it. Or it could be just bugged right now.
The top left slot of the backpack is a inhibitor augment.
Yes.
One of the things that we're going to be trying out with this experimental build is spawning you with a little equipment right off the bat. Not necessarily because that's the actual onboarding experience we want to give players in the final game, but it's a good way to get players to be able to test some of these new features out without having to go through the entire research production loop.
Right.
And so the inhibitor augment is there in part because one of the changes that we've made is augments now draw power, since the deform tool doesn't have to. So you'll be able to play with that dynamic right away as soon as you drop in.
Yes. Okay, cool. I gave it a little bit of sound if you guys want to hear that stuff. So shall we start this demo? I've already sort of scrolled through the backpack. People were asking about crafting containers.
Yeah. Yep.
So
you can craft them right from the backpack. It costs a single resin. The hope there is that
I need to get some resin.
we don't want these canisters to be a precious resource. A lot of people are worried about the space economy of your backpack as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we recognize that as being its own kind of cost, how you balance your capacity for holding terrain versus any other items that you might want to carry with you. So it didn't make sense to us to have a additional cost on being able to just produce a thing anyway.
Right.
So you'll be able to make them pretty easily, but you'll still have to make that trade-off. Do you want to take up the space with them or not?
Right. So I have, interestingly, and maybe this will make you cry a little bit, I've been just doing this while playing and just using all the slots on my terrain tool.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're there for, right?
Right.
Like, I think the storage economy of our game is really interesting because having this generic slot system on the one hand is the sort of thing that can really drive the kinds of modularity that we want.
Mm-hmm.
But it also introduces this really interesting pro-con kind of strategic evaluation, right? Where if your slots can hold anything, that means you're also limited to all of the slots that you have for everything.
Right.
So if you want to give up your ability to hold augments so that you can have some extra canisters, like that's intended.
Yes. So one thing to note here that I didn't notice the first time I played this was that there's an indicator on these canisters that show when they're full or when they're not.
Yep, and that is super dev art. That's not indicative of our intended visual design.
Yeah.
But it is a really first pass effort at just making sure that you have as much feedback as you can get around what the state is there. And some of that feedback is still yet to be implemented. We, in the long term, want you to be able to see what your overall capacity is without having to look at an individual canister. So,
right.
One of our ideas is when you have your terrain brush out, you'll have a sediment gauge around the edge of that circle so you can see as it's filling up or depleting.
Oh, no. I came out of the hole
too
soon. Oh, gosh.
Can we maybe speed time up with the...
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, you can hang out down here.
We'll just hang out down here, and I'll just keep collecting some terrain right now. So you gotta actually explain. Let's talk about gathering terrain, because like this has been my little pit that I've been using as like my little strip mine to gather stuff, and I guess yeah. I mean, these are full. The ones on my terrain tool are all full now, and then this one's starting to fill up. So you want to talk about that and like power and how that works?
Yep. So in the new system, you have no constraint on removing terrain. You can remove it with or without power, with or without daylight. You're never going to be halted from that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have space in canisters and canisters equipped, you'll fill up those canisters with the terrain that you're removing. Once they're full or you don't have any, then you start to burn it off, which permanently destroys that terrain.
Right.
So even though you're not constrained from removing, you still have to consider how important it is you to preserve that as a resource. And if you want to, take a pause in order to free up space.
Right. So I'm burning it off right now because all my containers are full.
So you can see on the back of the deform tool, there's a little flame there. There's no audio right now. Again, there's a lot of kind of feedback cues that have yet to go in.
Mm-hmm.
But our hope is that you'll never be surprised by, either filling up your canisters or running out, that you'll have good indications where you are at any given moment.
Yes. So there's some questions, and Zabir has been answering, but I want to address them on the stream. So one of the big questions is, are we going to be able to try this stuff out on Xbox? And the answer to that is currently no. Xbox does have the sort of like early access program that allows people to, sell underdeveloped games that are still being worked on, but they don't have a system for switching between branches and allowing you to try something else while still having the main version still be okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
that being said, I think one of our hopes with the experimental branch, now that we're starting to actively use it again,
mm-hmm.
is it can actually speed up the process for getting it into the full-on live build.
Yes.
Because we don't have to sit on it quite as long to internally validate. We can get it out there sooner, get the feedback much more quickly, make changes much more quickly, and then the overall time to get into the main branch is reduced.
Yes. So that's sort of right. That's the hope, right? It's to have several hundred people, several thousand people playing the branch, giving us feedback, and then we don't have to play it ourselves that entire time. And now we're just taking that information, rolling it in, and then boom, now we can put it out there.
So the short answer is ideally the experimental branch, even though it's Steam only, is still benefiting Xbox players.
Right. Okay, so now I've filled up all my canisters. I have all this sediment, and this is a new module that we should talk about.
Yeah, so the filter module is is kind of a prototype in the purest sense.
Yes, art not final for sure.
Art's not final, and even the concept is completely subject to change. Mostly what we wanted is to have some kind of example of using Sediment as a resource without committing to what form that actually takes in the long term. So this is almost placeholder gameplay, right? We just want to give an example of how you would use this. It may end up being similar to the final thing if we find that it actually works really well in the game,
right.
And it could be something totally different. But in this form, the way this works is kind of like the trade platform. You're converting the sediment into another resource.
Right.
And you can, to some degree, specify that by taking an existing resource, like the resin from your bag there in your printer.
So I take this guy
and you put it on the indicator slot on the left, and that's going to calibrate the resource that you're filtering for. And then once the tank on the module is full, I think you actually need a little more sediment.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, just a sliver. There's
hold on.
A bug with how
there we go.
There you go. Fill it up, set the resource you're filtering for, and then go, and it's going to produce a quantity of resources based on the rarity of the resource you give it. For now, we've actually limited it to compound and resin, just because of the potential for it to really de-incentivize people exploring if they can use it to get some of the rarer resources. But there's potential things that we can do there in the long term to make it a little less overpowered and still have value in that space, right? You might be able to use a consumable item to calibrate it for a rare resource, and so you can filter on that once, and then you're going to have to produce that key again.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So instead of just using the raw material, you'd have to have some sort of concentrated form of it that will then disperse through like the sediment or something. Yes, totally. But I do like the sort of fantasy behind this idea that like you're gathering a terrain and then you're putting this thing on there, and then this is filtering out all the other stuff you don't want and then taking the stuff out that you do want.
And part of this is a goal that we have broadly for the game, which is that one of the issues that we internally have with the trade platform is it's a very kind of passive mechanic. It's this sort of magical alchemy that gives you anything from anything, and once you have that, it becomes pretty destabilizing to some of the core game loops that we're driving for. And in the
one fantasy, would say broken.
Yeah, almost, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the core fantasies, at least for us, of the game is that you have this kind of scientist-engineer fantasy, that you are solving problems through your wits, not just using magic spells, right? And so even at a very simple basic level, the filter is a little closer aligned to that fantasy, where you're engaging a little bit more in problem solving. You have to have the resource that you are calibrated for. There's potentially a progression there where you only get basic resources to begin with, and then you have to do extra work to get the rare resources.
Right.
And it just drives more of this almost puzzle solving kind of workflow for earning the resources that you get rather than effectively getting them for free.
So someone made a really good point here. Sam Drate, I always stumble over your name. Whenever I travel to another planet, I'm always carrying tons of compound and resin with small amounts of the rare materials. With this, you can stack tons of the high-end materials and just make the common stuff with sediment, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, another goal that this is trying to address is that the common resources, at the beginning of the game, it makes sense that you are going to go around and find all the big clumps of it immediately surrounding your base and get them to just kind of kickstart your base. But once you've processed all of those, and those deposits get further and further afield, instead of being an interesting game loop, it becomes a grind where you're just having to go farther and farther to find some really basic resources that you use for everything. And the filter module can be one of those sorts of things that is a higher level kind of piece of tech that can shift that dynamic to be a little more localized as you've exhausted your local supply. And so that's another thing we're really conscious of, is that game loops that work really well early in the game don't necessarily scale further into the game, and vice versa, right? So we want the gameplay experience to be really dynamic, and you're kind of getting tired of a given dynamic and it's overstayed its welcome, that's a great point for us to introduce a new dynamic that kind of serves the same function, possibly at a much larger scale.
There's some debate right now talking about someone asking about the crane and the drill. I'm sure Elijah has lots of things to say about that, but we're probably gonna wait. Oh, here's some resin up here. I'm just looking for some materials to.
Somebody asks if the filter module would replace the trade platform. It's too early to say. I mean, the easy answer is pretty much any module in the game right now is sort of up for grabs in terms of what we do with it.
Right.
I think more what we're interested in is asking the question, does a given module serve the gameplay needs that we have for it or not, right? And if it doesn't, then we need to figure something else out. And if we have two things that effectively do the same thing and one is more interesting, more engaging, then I wouldn't be surprised if that's the one we go with. But we're definitely not committed to any of those kinds of changes right now.
That's a large philosophical question, Levitt J. There are no enemies in the traditional sense, but one would argue that this game doesn't necessarily need enemies to be compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the environment is your enemy. There you go.
There's two ways of looking at it, right? I mean, at its core, I think for us, an enemy is just another kind of obstacle. And what we're really interested in is the way in which you engage with and overcome obstacles in our game. You know, I said it a bit earlier, but we kind of see ourselves as sort of a puzzle-based survival game in the sense of you're this stranded engineer kind of MacGyvering your way to success. And so the obstacles that we want to introduce are obstacles that you can solve rather than defeat.
Right.
Right. So to the extent that you'll see something you might classify as an enemy, it would still have to fulfill that idea that it's fundamentally a puzzle that you're having to figure out a solution for.
So one of the interesting things that I just realized, and someone asked the question, is while I was mining for that stuff, that laterite, I was also getting terrain in my container. So while I was doing that, there was still terrain being destroyed or being collected. And that was going right into my sediment containers. So if you don't necessarily just want to go on sediment hunting trips, just regular gameplay, as long as you have containers crafted, you're gonna get stuff.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the goal, right? Is internally we talk a lot about how there's kind of two sides to the gameplay dynamic in Astroneer.
Sorry.
At the lowest kind of immediate. Especially early player experience level, you have this really laid back, kind of casual, I don't want to say low engagement, but it's not stressful, right? It's not requiring intense concentration. And the Deform tool, I think, forms the backbone of that side of the experience.
Yes.
And then built on top of that are all of these other systems that do engage you more, that do require more concentration or decision making or problem solving. And so it's really important to us that the balance between those two sides is maintained. And so even as we're introducing a new, more complex system to Deformation, we don't want it to require that higher level engagement that the other systems do.
Right.
And so having this more passive gathering of the terrain that just kind of happens as you're doing other things is kind of our attempt to maintain that balance.
So my question, before we move on to the next module, because we've been talking about this one a lot and we kind of went off a little bit. If I add more of the material that I'm trying to make, is that so there's two sides to this. Is it
so the right side is just the output.
Got it. Okay.
The hologram that shows up is just there to indicate that that's what you're going to be getting once you hit the button.
Got it. So this is in and then that's out.
Yep.
And then there's just slots on the side.
And again, the kind of UI visual feedback here is all placeholder. We haven't actually done any kind of visual design pass on this.
Right. So there's a super great question right now that will help us transition to the next phase, which is, could the canisters be used for other resources like copper or oxygen, like the new hydrazine is supposed to work?
So short answer is there will definitely be more resources that canisters are used for.
Right.
There's kind of this almost implicit concept of liquid resources in the game right now that is limited to just a handful of things. You could kind of think of power and oxygen and hydrazine as all sort of being liquid. And one of the goals of the reusable canister is that we formalize that concept of liquids a little bit. And, you know, something that we're working on that we don't really have any hard determinations on yet is to what extent those liquid states will extend to some of the existing resources.
Right.
But we are definitely playing around with the idea that kind of matter state is a new thing that's independent of a resource type, and that you may see solid versions of a resource and liquid versions.
Right.
And in the liquid case, you'll always have these canisters that are kind of slot storage for those liquid states.
So PED thought it was RNG between compound and resin. It is not. You feed it one, and then it gives you whatever you want out of it.
Yeah, so on the left side of the module, he's put down a block of compound, so that's what he's going to get out. If he puts resin down, he'll get resin out.
Cool. All right, so should we talk about ammonium?
Yeah, so once we had the reusable canister, the thing we immediately went to is, okay, hydrazine also uses canisters, but it's really weird about it. Like you go and collect what is ostensibly raw resource out of the ground,
right?
And you get out refined rocket fuel in a canister,
right.
Which is kind of anathema to our entire fantasy of the game. And so now that we
there's
had
some right there.
Yeah, exactly, right? So now that we had this reusable canister, that solves the problem of how do we produce the canisters that holds the hydrazine if you don't just collect it from the environment. But it also felt weird then to collect hydrazine in a solid form, because again, hydrazine is a refined, produced
rocket fuel.
Rocket fuel. It's very much not something.
Okay. Bye. They're going to lunch.
Well, it's going to get all empty out there.
Yeah.
It's not something you're going to find in the environment.
Right.
And so we're introducing ammonium. It really was just a little bit of kind of Wikipedia research on my part to just identify an ingredient that could reasonably be something you would find in the wild. And ammonium is now the solid raw form. And so it's similar to the smelter in that you have intermediary resources.
Right.
But we're putting a spin on it for liquids, which is that you need that canister now in order to produce the refined form.
So where do I throw this? Do I throw just?
That is the condenser. You want to
right.
go to the refinery. Looks like a smelter.
I think it's
again,
this one.
Placeholder art. I just.
I'm pretty sure it's this one because it has those things.
Yeah, so it's the
slots
one that
on
has
the top.
The slots on the top.
Yeah.
So if you and this is actually kind of cool. If you put a canister on a storage slot.
Oh, okay. Hold on. These go here?
Yep, they go on the bottom, just like the smelter resources.
Okay, I need a container. I don't think I have one right now. Steal these.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, those were canisters holding terrain previously.
Yes.
It's not doing it automatically. So if you take off one of the ammonium.
Well, this one jumped on. Yeah. That one jumped on.
Okay, I don't know why the others didn't. There's a bug. But the idea is because this canister introduces more in-between steps, we want to be really conscious about, the tedium of some of these interactions and smooth that out as much as possible. So the idea is as you place the ammonium down, it will automatically pull a canister up from storage for each one that you place.
Do I need to? Hold on. I think it had the button before, and then I added these on there, and it was like.
Maybe pull it down to just one. There might be.
Oh, there's a storm coming. Oh. Something happened.
Yeah, something happened.
Okay, we're just gonna do that. Okay. We'll do this before the storm comes.
Good. We'll fix these for the experiment.
There you go. A little bug on the stream.
So, obviously, as you're refining the ammonium, the canisters are getting filled up with hydrazine. And now when you use that hydrazine, if you attach it to a shuttle tank and it depletes the hydrazine into the tank, you'll have the canister left behind. It won't consume the canister anymore.
There's a close-up of the canister right now.
And the canister will continue to be generic. So once you've depleted it of the hydrazine, you can go on to use it for sediment or more hydrazine, and eventually all sorts of different liquids.
Yes. Okay, let's wait for the storm to blow over, and then we'll get back into it. So, I really like this. I really like this new mechanic because it was like a mental thing for me where I was like, I'm just walking down here, I'm mining this purple stuff, and now all of a sudden I have a container that I didn't craft, and I have a liquid resource. This is so weird.
Yeah.
So this.
There's definitely some cognitive disconnect there. There's some other things that we want to do with this, like. Although I think having a process in your game loop is interesting on its own, ideally, I don't want you to have in-between steps that are effectively mandatory, where the only thing you'll do at a given stage is go on to the next stage.
Right.
And so right now, with like the unrefined metals, the only thing you're ever really going to do with those metals is smelt them. There's no reason to maintain them in an unrefined state.
Right.
And something that I want us to look into doing more of is having more of those trade-offs where, okay, I could smelt my malachite, or I can use malachite in this other state that I can't use copper.
Right.
In the case of ammonium, the goal is, as a really simple differentiator, hydrazine, obviously we made it explosive. Ammonium won't be. So if you want to safely store what is effectively your fuel resource, you can leave it in that crystal ammonium form, not worry about it blowing up your base, and then only refine it as it's needed.
The canister does say sediment. That is not.
The canister should only say sediment if it has sediment in it.
So when it's right now when it's empty, the default just means it says sediment.
Oh, that's a bug. That's another thing we'll fix.
Cool. But I do have some hydrazine now that I'm being very careful with because it's explosive, like you said. So I'm going to throw it in my ship, and yeah, we'll look at the next part of this. So the other thing is, yeah, now this container is here, and you can continue using it. That's not where I wanted it to go. We don't want to fuel up our backpack.
Maybe we do. Maybe one day we'll have a jetpack.
Oh, right.
Hook up the hydrazine.
You just said a dirty word. Everyone's going to freak out now.
The dirty word being maybe, of course.
Yes.
To be clear, there are no existing prototypes of a jetpack. That is completely undecided.
See that? Aaron mentioned jetpack. Oh, gosh.
When we put this up live after the stream's done, you're going to have to flash no promises from saying that.
Yes. Anyway, okay, so cool. That's the refinery, this new module for ammonium.
Yep.
And hydrazine. So what do we have left now?
So the final change, now that you aren't harvesting hydrazine from the environment, is the condenser is kind of in this weird state if we left it unchanged compared to the refinery, especially because...
Do I even have one? I don't know if I have one set up.
I think you do. It's one of the tanks.
Oh.
Yeah.
This guy, yes.
Yep. We didn't want it to be the case where the fuel condenser, once you have that, is you just give up on refining ammonium because the condenser is so much more efficient. And so the condenser now, it takes a canister in order to produce hydrazine. And B, because it has the canister as a separate item, we can do something like have it take multiple full batteries in order to fill it up. And this also lets us play around with the idea of a streaming economy, which is something that we've kind of thought a lot about internally.
Right.
And so we can kind of test out some of those power streaming ideas without totally rebuilding our power system. So with this guy, it'll fill it up a little ways, the battery will fill back up again, and then if it has a canister attached with some partial hydrazine, it'll automatically trigger the module and it'll fill up the next bit.
Right.
And so the condenser still has value in that you don't have to go through the whole harvesting loop of finding ammonium and refining it, but hopefully there's a little bit more of a trade-off with just the speed at which it produces, where you're a little more reliant on the economies of scale with this for it to actually be a viable replacement for the refinery.
So the initial comment right there, boom, this system is way too slow. I think this is sort of an alternative, right? Like the main way you would probably want to be gathering hydrazine going forward is to use this module. But at the same time, this allows you to like, let's say you can't find any ammonium. You don't know what but you want to fly off into a separate place, or if you land on the moon and there's no ammonium near you, you'll still be able to make hydrazine.
Yeah.
You'll still be able to take off.
More than that, this points to one of the core dynamics that we talk about in Astroneer, which is that we have these two primary player types, the engineer and the pioneer. And this is the sort of dynamic that we're looking at to differentiate those two, where the pioneer is very specialized about how they produce resources. They go right to the high density source, and they'll spend more time exploring to find the source, and we'll probably have eventually tools that help them narrow down that search. But once they find it, they'll get it in bulk from a single collection point. But that necessitates them being on the move. That necessitates them doing more of the kind of nomadic exploration.
Right.
On the engineer side, it's much more about the economies of scale, and that in order to be efficient while being static and stable at a single base, you have to build up your production systems at a much bigger scale. The kind of vision for that is with like sediment, you might have a dowsing rod augment that lets you find really high concentration lithium sediment. And so you can go there and then get a bunch of sediment out of that single block of terrain. But the engineer is just going to strip mine the mountain. And any square inch might not give him much lithium, but the whole mountain is going to give him quite a bit.
Right.
And so having these kind of different focuses on how you get your resources, and whether you're focused more on a automation system that lets you work at way more than individual capability, or you focus on that individual experience, that's the kind of paths that we want to enable players to go down.
Yeah, I mean, at this point right now, right, if I really wanted a lot of hydrazine, this is just going to encourage me to make like a little farm that just has some condensers. They're always going. So I'm going to go out and do my thing and just like explore the planet. And when I come back, I'm going to have a decent amount of hydrazine that's going to allow me to then.
And that's exactly the goal with like the streaming power on that plan, right? Is that you don't have to babysit it, sit there watching it fill, click it, watch it fill, click it. You can just set it and forget it.
Right.
Make sure you get a full canister out of it.
Yes. So right now, there's the wind's going now. That's good. So I made another one right now at nighttime, and this base isn't well equipped for, creating power at night. But if that were the case, I could go on a night exploration and then come back, and I would have a couple hydrazine that were just like kind of doing their thing while I wasn't around. Make sure
you have some batteries hooked up to go through multiple charges. But that's the point, right? Is that if you're going to get the convenience of automation and being able to produce at your base, that's going to take a lot of infrastructure. That's going to take a lot of setup.
Right. If you could just land on a planet, boom, start creating hydrazine like crazy, that breaks the loop of the game.
And again, it's that idea that you're solving problems. You're not having solutions handed to you. Modularity, the little bit I'll say about it, also ties into that we wanted, we think the game is most interesting when the player has as much agency as possible over how they tackle a given challenge. And so as much as possible, we don't want to give you kind of pre-baked solutions to things. We want to give you the pieces and the tools so that you can build up your toolbox and use those tools dynamically as you encounter a problem in a different way each time.
So someone made a point saying on that point, it should be a lot easier to make more bases. I think with this system, with terrain as a resource, right? If I wanted to go and make a new base over here, I would be able to produce resin and compound basically at will, and then be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna go scale up another base across
for sure
on the other side of this mountain, and I won't have to like be at the mercy of resin and compound areas.
Just to the point of base building itself, that is, if you look at our roadmap, definitely something that we have recognized as a boulder that needs a lot of work.
Yes.
And so
we
have big plans to make the entire base building game loop more interesting and more consistent with the themes that I've been talking about.
Right. And then not to go too much more into modularity, but I think you mentioned it publicly. This wasn't a secret. The idea that it would be really cool to be able to move your base around easily, right?
Yeah, and I mean, without saying more, the little tease that we did in our last vlog, there weren't wheels on that, set of modular platforms. So even though ostensibly I've been focused, and I have been focused on vehicle modularity,
yes,
we don't intend to limit modularity to just those vehicles.
Right. That's sort of the point, right? Is that all those things will just be completely interchangeable, and you'll be able to create things at your will, which then you just use your imagination, right? We need the GIF right now of what's his name?
Oh, yeah, mind blown.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, and I mean, to the point of Astroneer versus Pioneer, our other big goal for those two playstyles is that they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to have kind of a gray spectrum that connects those 2 points that you can move back and forth between. And so modularity is another point that we really want to leverage in order to capture that dynamic.
Yes. And so an interesting thing, someone mentioned just now talking about how their planets are going to have huge holes in them. It's kind of cool, right? It's kind of this cool thing where, like, if I was on Terran for like 12 hours and I was making bases and getting the materials I wanted, and then I go up to the moon and I start doing stuff up there and I do some more scientific stuff, I look down and go, man, I really own that planet.
Yeah, well, so my philosophy on this is we're not necessarily trying to make a game that is trying to deliver a sort of judgmental, eco-conscious message.
Right.
But what we are trying to deliver is a game that is highly systemic. And my opinion is that systemic games are the most interesting when your actions have consequences.
Yes.
And that I'm personally disappointed when I exert my agency on the world and nothing changes, right?
Right, yes.
It just stays the same. And so, I want us to deliver sort of these complex interconnected systems that result in really emergent and dynamic outcomes, and for better and worse, right? And that it's fundamentally up to the player to decide whether it's for better or worse. Like maybe there's, if we had, hypothetically,
here we go.
No promises, but if we had something like Atmosphere with different atmospheric composition, and if you are doing a lot of smelting that is producing coal particles, and your atmosphere is changing to a high coal density, maybe that has an effect on the kinds of plant life that is spawning, but
yes.
maybe you can also do something with that coal, right? So you get to decide the trade-off there. Am I willing to effectively terraform the planet for the advantages that terraforming gives me, right? It's up to the player to make a determination on the value of those sorts of large-scale impacts.
Yes, I'm so excited for that.
You have to have the impact to do that, right?
Yes,
like
right.
if you have no impact, you have no gameplay.
Yes, I'm excited for that idea, is to jump up, into space and go, whoa, or actually, go up into space and see, well, actually, I've already tapped out that hemisphere or that section of the planet, and now I'm going to move to a different one. Now I want to go to a more sort of untouched
and
one.
having said that, it is really important to us that you continue to have a choice, right? What we don't want to say is, in order to advance and progress and see everything that there's to be seen, that you have to be this kind of sediment tycoon and
right,
that you're going to have to strip mine your entire planet. And that's, again, the trade-off between a pioneer and an engineer is you can take a path of least impact and play the nomad and specialize to a degree that you're really efficient about how you're getting these resources and resulting in very small changes, right?
Yes.
It takes effort. It takes a different kind of effort, but that option is available to you, and that's really important to us.
Okay, so people are asking, we've been teasing them long enough. Someone says they're going to a conference call in 5 minutes. So let's just put the details out there. People are waiting, and they want to know when they're going to be able to get their hands on this.
We are planning to put this up on Friday. It's good that we saw a couple bugs that need to get fixed, but we are pretty much raring to go. We'll get that out on the Steam experimental branch and start getting feedback from you guys ASAP.
Yes. So Friday is the day. We'll have more details, including a bunch of information on how to play it and just like some sort of surrounding stuff. And then we'll also have a survey for people that they can leave their feedback on, so we can sort of sort through all of that. So yes, Friday, this will be on Steam Experimental Branch for people to play. And also, one thing to note is that the controller prototype is going to stay in this branch.
Yeah, we're not necessarily always going to do that. We might have some updates that are kind of one-offs and they're pulled from the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, we see them as really kind of additive experiments. And so we want to see how people react to the new controller stuff in the context of these new systems.
Right. Plus, I think there'll be more of a sort of push for people to play it if there's actually also a gameplay dynamic that they can also enjoy at the same time. Right?
Yeah, so this also gives them a good reason to
jump in,
play with the already in place experiment.
Yes, cool. All right, I think that's everything. This is we got through it in less than an hour. I guess maybe I can just like.
Do we want to?
Oh wait, is there anything else?
Open up to any other questions?
Yes, I'm totally ready to answer questions for a bit before we head out. Have we heard about Moons of Madness? I have not heard about Moons of Madness.
I have not.
Oh, there's a bunch of excitement of just like, whoa, Friday, yeah,
yes,
woo. Yeah. I definitely wanted to do like we did last time where we were like, and it's available right now, and then just like drop the mic and walk out. But
which, to be clear, we will say that on Friday.
Yes,
it is not available right now.
Yes. Don't make Ashenir too easy. I think this actually makes Ashenir a little bit not easy or not harder or easier.
Like engaging.
Yes.
Like it gives you more to interact with, and it hopefully gives you more agency over directing the experience rather than us kind of scripting. This is what happens when you do X or Y.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of choose the consequences or just the outcomes of your actions.
Right. What else we got? MIDI controller support. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming that's like.
I think they want to just hook up their keyboard in the musical instrument sense. I'm pretty sure there are input layers.
You can do that yourself.
Open
probably.
Source out there that you can map. And please post it if you do.
Oh, this is a good question for you. Because you talk about this a lot, how Ashenir is like a choose your own difficulty game where you.
Yes, absolutely, and this ties
You're
into
very passionate
why
about this.
I am very passionate about this. It's before I started at System Era, it was one of the things that I really loved about the game, just as a player. I tend to dislike option settings in part because they can be really vague. You know, what does medium difficulty mean?
Right.
Unless you've played the game already, you don't know. It
Mm-hmm.
means that it is in some form more challenging than easy. In what form? Who knows? Play the game, figure it out, right?
Right.
And choose your own difficulty means more than just having an option. It means doing it in a way that is intuitive, where you understand how you are adjusting the difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that we've attempted to do that is with opt-in difficulty. Like, I think one of the pieces that really differentiates the game from other similar kind of survival crafting games is in its basic state, when you touch down on the planet, there is effectively no threat to your survival. There's an exception in the form of storms, but even those aren't going to hit very soon, most likely after you land.
Right.
You compare that to other games where at night monsters come out, and if you haven't built a shelter, you're going to be devoured, right? Like, so there's this pressure from the moment that you touch down. In our game, we wanted that pressure to be present, but we wanted it to be a pressure that the player elects into. And what this really results in is this fantastic dynamic where you are safe sort of by default, but in order to extend the range of your safety, you have to leave it.
Right.
You have to push out of that boundary and get the resources that you need and the unlocks and research that you need in order to extend the reach of this safety bubble. And so you have this back and forth between casual and laid back and safe and a little higher stakes.
Right.
And when you bring in the biomes into it with the different planets and the different areas of a planet, you can kind of calibrate those different levels of challenge in a way that just makes a lot of intuitive sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a player, you walk into a scary cave with green mist coming out of the plants. that's probably a higher threat area than chilling at your base.
Yes, for sure. And you can make decisions based on some of that context and how you're going to proceed.
And you can also make choices about how you want to engage with that threat level in terms of like how prepared you are. Right. You can hang back at base and gather up a lot of equipment to sort of localize your safety bubble around yourself and then go out, or you can be a total maverick and just charge into battle and survive by your wits and gumption. So that is absolutely core to the game dynamic. Yes.
So I love that. Like right now, I also, just as a side note, I love the fact that power, you're removing terrain doesn't take power, because when you're caving or spelunking, you don't have a really crappy time of just like, oh man, I can't do this, but I'm right next to it right now.
Yeah.
And you're really only worrying about oxygen.
I mean, and you still have that to an extent with the constructive side of the game, right? You can't just sit there and build spires endlessly. But the path to re-enable that is much more proactive now, right? Mm-hmm. Before, you also couldn't just sit there endlessly. Either you have solar panels and the sun goes down and then you're back to your battery, or you're just on your battery to begin with. And once that empties, all you can really do for the most part is sit there and wait for either the sun to come up or your backpack to charge on its own.
Right.
It's very passive, it's very disengaging, very disruptive. Now you run out of sediment while you're trying to build your spire. Go carve a hole next to the spire and you can continue to build it.
Right.
Like, so you have a lot of agency over maintaining that dynamic that you didn't have before.
Totally. Any other questions? We're now at 1 o'clock. So, did we say anything about research? We didn't say anything about research, and we will continue to not say anything about research. If you want a little hint about what's being worked on in research right now, you can check out the vlog, or some intrepid user on Reddit saw something that slipped into the vlog, maybe deliberately, maybe not, and it explains the direction.
Never deliberately teased anything in those vlogs.
No, I just totally forgot, right? Like I did not do that. Oh, someone had already commented on that. We have top men. There are many people talking about research right now, and yes, expecting more. I actually want to address that. So right now we sort of run this thing where we want to talk about all the things, but we also need to pace ourselves. And I can't always just like in the vlog be like, here's a new feature, here's a new feature, here's a new feature, here's a new feature, because they reflect what happens throughout the week. So last week we did have the all hands. Last week I was out of the office for a day at a conference. And so it's just going to reflect more what I'm doing and maybe less what the entire team is doing, but it's not always just going to be, hey, check out the new thing. It's going to also just be about the team in general.
And speaking as a designer, it's also really valuable to us on the design team that information is not piecemeal, but not all at once, because it keeps our audience from getting overwhelmed by too much information, right?
Totally.
And if you have 100 different new features being teased, the value of any given one decreases, and it's harder to read the community on that given feature.
Mm-hmm.
And so by being more selective about which one we're showing when, we can get more active and usable feedback to help drive the development of these new things.
Yes, totally. All right, I think that's about it. The strange looking thing next to a module on the vlog. You know what? I'm just gonna put that out there because I know what you're talking about, and it's been in past vlogs. No, yeah, they're talking about you.
Not that strange looking.
Let's face it, we are junkies. We need a constant fix. Yes, I'm realizing that. It's the cheat module. It's been in
the cheat plimp.
Yes, yeah. Every once in a while it pops up. There's a module for development. Every game has this, where you're developing things. You just need things.
Yeah.
You need them handy.
And I mean, let's be honest. The reason it's not in the game is because those things make games less fun. Right?
Yes.
They're really handy. It's like cheat mode. I know when I was a kid and I found the cheat menu in any given game, the first 30 minutes, even like 3 hours. I was like, oh yeah, I can do whatever I want. And then I'm like, oh, I can do whatever I want. Okay.
Yes.
I'm kind of bored.
Yep.
Right, so this is not meant to be an effortless game by any means.
Okay, I think that's it. Someone just woke up. All right, so let's recap before we go.
Okay.
Oh, actually, before we recap, there are multiplayer crash bugs and just overall crash bugs that are being worked on literally right there.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
actually, not right now. They're at lunch. But
today,
some of the multiplayer stuff I've heard has been fixed, and it's a huge priority for the team to make sure that before the next update, we have multiplayer working across all platforms. Cool. I'm sorry, we don't call it cheap. It's creative mode. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, buddy. Okay, so let's recap the stream. We started off by just chatting quickly about the idea of terrain as a resource. And then we explained some stuff really quickly. So I'll just run by them and then you can quickly give us an overview.
And there will be a follow-up post that
with the video and all sorts of other
walks
things.
through just these things super concisely.
Yes.
So you don't have to sit through this hour-long stream to figure it out. So there's the filter module. It takes sediment that you've gathered with the deform tool and turns it into either compound or resin based on which resource you've calibrated with.
Yes, you got to
So
fill it up, and then once you fill it
compound
up,
on the left means compound produced on the right.
yes,
The fuel condenser is still the fuel condenser, but now it requires a reusable canister to be hooked up in order to produce the hydrazine, and it takes multiple subsequent battery charges to fill a canister. But there's a little bit of automation in that if you have a partially filled canister, once the battery's full, it will automatically trigger and continue to fill it.
yes.
And then there is the refinery.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, automation, it's happening. It's still going to do its thing while there's power. Refinery
is a new module for right now, just with hydrazine, potentially maybe with liquids in a more general sense. But it converts your solid, kind of unrefined hydrazine resource into refined liquid hydrazine. Unlike the smelter and like the condenser, it takes reusable canisters in order to refine the ammonium.
Yes.
And ammonium is now the thing you'll gather from the purple crystals that used to give you hydrazine canisters.
Yep. And
there's the canister itself, printable in your backpack, takes 1 resin.
I think
for the purposes of the experimental test, you'll start off with a canister and a augment, the inhibitor, so that you can play around with some of the new power dynamics.
Hold on, where is it?
There you go. Yep, produce a canister.
Yay!
And deform tool no longer draws power.
Mm-hmm.
Some new things do, like augments, and your backpack therefore will no longer trickle charge, so you'll have to manage your own power.
Yes, so I can just keep deforming forever, but if I want to add terrain or even flatten terrain, it's going to cost.
So flatten is more of a tech limitation. What we're actually working on is having it tied directly to the amount that you change the terrain by. In the future, flatten, therefore, sometimes you're removing, sometimes you're adding, and your sediment resource will adjust accordingly. But we're not there yet, and for the purposes of this test, we just had to pick. Either it adds or takes away.
Yes. Okay, cool. I think that's it.
All
Stream
right.
over. It's 10 after. We've
Thanks for
gone the full hour.
hanging out with us. Can't wait to see your guys' feedback on Friday and over the weekend.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I won't answer any more questions. Sorry, guys.
All right, guys. We got to get back to work.
We'll see you in Discord. Okay. Bye. Have a wonderful day, everyone, for
time.
watching. And once again, Friday, it'll be launching an experimental branch for everyone. So
check it out.
Okay. Bye. Oh gosh. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Okay. Bye.